weighed by the kilo, sold for meat, until the lonely human who bought her said, "I'll take you home." The market dome of Neros, for is a place designed for transactions, not mercy. Glass walls rise high above the floor, reflecting cold white light from overhead panels. Rows of buyers sit on benches arranged in semicircles, their eyes fixed on the center platform where the scale waits. No names are called here, only weights. The smell of fried mushrooms and disinfectant fills the air, a mix of hunger and control. Arian stands barefoot behind the guardrail. The thin, translucent cloth wrapped around her hips is meant to humiliate, not protect. She can feel the stairs moving across her skin as if she were already cut open. Her throat is dry. She has learned not to show fear. Any display of weakness invites laughter or worse. Still, her stomach knots as the guard signals her forward. She steps onto the glass plate. The surface is cold, slick. Numbers climb quickly on the digital display, then freeze. The auctioneer doesn't look at her, doesn't see her face, only the figure. 72.6 kilos, he announces, voice flat. The clerk keys it in. A ripple of chatter moves through the hall. Buyers do their math aloud, some estimating cuts of meat, others whispering whether her weight makes her worth the price. Arian steadies her breath. She tells herself, stand tall, don't fold, don't give them the satisfaction. Bids start in clipped tones. The first comes from a butcher in a stained apron. The second from a kitchen manager known for supplying military barracks. The numbers rise slowly, without urgency. Arian doesn't care who wins. Each possibility means the same ending. She locks her gaze above the crowd, trying to keep her thoughts away from the knives. Then a new voice cuts through. Mine. One word. Calm, steady. It comes from the back of the hall. Not shouted, not bargained. The crowd turns. The speaker is a man in his 30s, broad-shouldered, his orchard shirt rolled at the sleeves. His boots are dusty, his hair cropped close with strands of gray. He stands with the discipline of someone who once wore a uniform, but no insignia remains. His name, Arian learns it only later, is Tyler Stroud. The auctioneer pauses. The tone was not the tone of a man haggling. After a quick glance at the clerk, the sale is stamped and logged. The deal is final. Buyers murmur their disappointment. Some mutter insults, but the man doesn't respond. He walks forward, pulls off his field coat, and drapes it over Arian's shoulders. The fabric is rough and heavy, but warm. For the first time in weeks, she feels covered. He looks her directly in the eyes and says, voice even, I'll take you home. The words land harder than she expects. Not to the yard, not to the block. Home. She almost doesn't trust she heard him right. He guides her down from the scale, no hand on her arm, no shove. Just walking beside her. Buyers watch, some snickering, others confused. To them, she was bought like livestock. To him, she isn't being dragged, she's leaving. Outside the dome, the air feels different. Colder, real. The sounds of the market fade into the hum of cargo haulers and the low chatter of workers finishing their shifts. Arian tightens the coat around herself. Her feet ache against the rough ground, but she doesn't stumble. She keeps glancing at the man, Tyler, trying to read him. Why would a farmer come to a place like this? Why waste credits on her? Only to walk away with no sign of use or profit. Tyler leads her toward an old cargo hauler parked against the curb. Its paint is dull, its engine marked by years of use. He opens the passenger door and lays a folded blanket on the seat before gesturing for her to climb in. He doesn't explain, doesn't reassure. He simply makes space for her. For a second, she hesitates, weighing whether to run, but she knows where she would end up, back in the dome, another sale, another butcher. She gets in. He shuts the door gently, not slamming it. Then he rounds to the driver's side, climbs in, and starts the engine. The machine rumbles, shaking the floor beneath her feet. He checks the mirrors, scanning the alley and street with the practiced eyes of someone trained never to overlook danger. Then he drives. Arian sits rigid, clutching the coat. Her mind races. What is his plan? Is he different, or only hiding it well? She doesn't ask out loud. Fear keeps her quiet, but curiosity burns under it. If you want to meet, he would have left her on the floor of the dome. If he wanted to break her, he would have shown it by now. But he hasn't. That unsettles her more than cruelty would. Cruelty, she understands. Silence, she doesn't. Tyler keeps his eyes on the road. He doesn't ask her questions, doesn't demand gratitude. His face is set, calm, but his jaw tightens now and then, like a man carrying thoughts he won't say aloud. His life has been one of structure, once a Federation scout, now an orchard keeper on the edge of Neros 4. He came to the market not for meat, not for business, but because he couldn't stomach watching people treated like livestock any longer. He didn't plan to walk away with anyone. But when he saw Arians standing tall on that scale, refusing to collapse under their jeers, he made his choice in a single breath. Arian doesn't know this yet. She only knows that for the first time in years, someone spoke to her like she was more than her weight. And that one word, home, now sits in her chest like both a promise and a threat. She stares out the window at the endless rows of pale orchard trees rushing past and wonders if he means it. If he does, it could change everything. If he doesn't, it will destroy what little remains. The road out of the city widened into long stretches of dirt lined with pale leaf orchards, their branches swaying lightly in the dry wind. The hum of the hauler filled the silence, steady and low, as Tyler guided the vehicle along rutted tracks. Arian sat against the passenger door, clutching his coat tighter around her shoulders. The fabric still carried the smell of earth, fruit, and smoke. Strange, almost comforting. Every bump in the road jolted her back to alertness. She scanned the orchards, expecting patrols or drones, but none appeared. No one followed. The dome was already behind them. Her thoughts circled the questions the audience might have asked after the first chapter. Why did he buy her? Why risk credits in a place like that? Why not leave her on the scale? Arian asked herself the same questions, but kept her mouth closed, afraid of the answer. Tyler broke the silence first. You should eat before sleep. His voice was steady, not unkind. She turned to him, wary. Eat what? Soup, he said simply. Left on the stove. He kept his eyes on the road, his tone flat, as if talking about weather. He didn't look at her, didn't probe. Arian narrowed her eyes, unsure whether this was some trick. She had heard men promise food before. She had also seen how quickly those promises turned into chains. And then, she asked, voice low. Then nothing, he said. You'll have a room. You can lock the door if you want. The words landed heavier than he likely intended. A door she could lock, on the inside. She swallowed and kept her gaze out the window. If he was lying, she would know soon enough. The hauler turned off the main track and rolled into a clearing. His house stood there, plain wood beams, patched roof, a clay stove leaning under a tin sheet. Baskets were stacked by the porch, some filled with dried fruit, others empty and waiting for harvest. Tools hung in neat rows on the wall. This wasn't the house of a rich man, nor a cruel one flaunting wealth. It was the house of someone who lived by routine, who worked with his hands. He parked, cut the engine, and stepped out. Arian didn't move. She watched him circle the vehicle, half expecting him to drag her out. Instead, he opened her door, not touching her, and said, inside. The words sounded more like guidance than command. She stepped down carefully, bare feet hitting the packed dirt. The ground was rough, sharp in places. She winced but didn't let show. He caught the reaction anyway. His eyes flicked to her feet, then to a crate near the porch where a pair of old sandals rested. Take those later, he said, and kept walking. Inside, the kitchen carried a faint warmth. The clay pot on the stove was still hot, steam curling from the rim. He ladled soup into a clay bowl and set it on the table with a wooden spoon. Varan root, he explained. Good for the stomach. He poured water into a cup and placed it beside the bowl. Arian stood in the doorway, not moving closer. She looked from him to the bowl, waiting for a trap. Why are you doing this? She asked. Tyler leaned against the counter, arms folded. Because you're not meat. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shift. He said like a fact. Eat. You'll need strength. His bluntness disarmed her more than a soft speech would have. Slowly, she crossed to the table and sat. The soup smelled of earth and salt, something clean. She dipped the spoon, tasted carefully. Warmth spread through her chest. She hadn't eaten real food in weeks. She lowered her guard slightly and ate more. Tyler moved toward the hallway. Room's down there. First door on the left. There's a bolt on the inside. You'll see it. She froze with the spoon halfway to her lips. And if I bolt it? He paused, met her eyes. Then you bolt it. I won't touch it. She studied him, searching for cracks in his words. His face was steady, almost unreadable, but not cold. He left her with the food and disappeared down the hallway. After finishing the soup, she explored carefully. The room was small, spare but clean. A bed with a patched blanket, a window looking out onto the orchard, and a wooden crate serving as a table. A clay cup sat on it, filled with water. She tested the bolt. It worked. She pressed it once, just to feel the click, then unbolted it again. She stood by the window, coat still around her shoulders, staring out into the silent rows of trees. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from confusion. She had expected pain, chains, commands. Instead, she had soup, a room, and a lock she could control. It unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. Tyler's voice carried faintly from the other room, low and even, talking to himself as he prepared something for the next day. She lay on the bed, listening. Her mind whispered warnings. This could change. He could reveal his true intent at any moment. Still, her body, starved and exhausted, gave in to rest. For the first time in months, she slept without someone standing over her. Morning light slipped between the thin curtains of the small room, catching on the dust floating in the air. Arian woke with her hand still resting on the bolt. Her body was stiff from sleeping too deeply, as if her mind hadn't dared to dream. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The silence, the bed beneath her, the faint smell of soil and fruit, all too different from the market's metal and disinfectant. Then the memory returned. The man, his coat, the soup, the words, "I'll take you home." She pushed herself upright, wrapping the coat tighter around her. A part of her expected to find him waiting at the door, watching, but the hallway was empty. The only sound came from outside, a steady rhythm, wood against wood, someone stacking crates. She moved slowly through the house, bare feet brushing against the cool floorboards. In the kitchen, the clay pot still sat on the stove. A folded note lay on the table, written in block letters. Food on stove. I'm outside. Work begins after breakfast. She read it twice. No demands, no threats, no insults. Just instructions. Arian ladled out what remained of the soup. It was simple, varin root and broth, thickened overnight, but it filled the hollow ache in her stomach. She tore off a chunk of Zyron bread from the dish beside the pot. It was hard, dry, but edible. She caught herself eating too quickly, as if someone might snatch the food away. No one came. When she stepped outside, the air struck colder than the day before. The orchard stretched in every direction, pale leaves glinting in the morning light. Tyler was by the shed, lifting crates onto a cart. His shirt was rolled at the sleeves again, sweat already darkening the fabric at his chest. He glanced up as she appeared in the doorway. "Eat," he asked. She nodded. "Good. Come here." His voice held no edge, just calm expectation. She hesitated, scanning the yard. This was the moment listeners from the earlier chapters might be wondering about. Would he put her straight to labor, prove she was nothing more than a purchase after all? Or was there something else? He pointed to a low table beside the shed. "Sort the fruit by size. Large ones in that basket, small ones in the other. Bruised ones go separate. They'll spoil the lot if you mix them." That was it. No heavy load, no back-breaking task. Just sorting. She knelt, the coat sliding open to reveal the shirt she wore beneath, tied clumsily at the waist. The fruit was smooth and pale, easy enough to handle. She placed them carefully, watching him from the corner of her eye. He moved like someone trained, each step exact, each lift economical. No wasted motion. After a while she spoke, the question slipping out before she could stop herself. "Why were you even at the market?" Tyler set down a crate, wiped his palms on his trousers, and looked at her. "Because I was tired of pretending I didn't see it." He didn't elaborate, didn't turn it into a speech. He simply returned to stacking. She wanted to ask more, but her throat tightened. Instead, she focused on the baskets. The The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was steady, like the orchard rows themselves. By midday, he called her over to the porch. 2 bowls of porridge sat cooling on the step, sweetened with ground larn seeds. He handed her one without comment. She ate, sitting opposite him. The sun was high, heat pressing against her bare legs, but the food was good. She caught him watching her, not with hunger or ownership, but as if he were measuring something quieter. "You expect me to trust this," she said finally. He tilted his head. "No, I expect you to decide for yourself." It was not the answer she'd expected. Most men demanded obedience, forced gratitude. He left the choice with her, and that made it harder to dismiss him as just another buyer. When the bowls were empty, he stood. "I'll show you the room to wash. There's a basin, water's cold." He didn't follow her inside, didn't linger. He left her to it. Arian washed quickly, the shock of cold water dragging tension from her skin. She found herself staring at her reflection in the small metal mirror above the basin. Blue skin marked by faint specks, green hair streaked bronze, eyes still hard with suspicion. She asked herself if this was what he saw when he looked at her. Not weight on a scale, not cuts of meat, but a woman. When she returned to the porch, he was repairing a section of drip line. His hands moved with practiced care. She stepped closer, cautious but curious. "You used to be military," she said. It wasn't a question. She had seen in the way he scanned the room, the way he carried himself. He didn't look up. "Federation scout. Long time ago. Why quit?" He secured the line, then finally met her eyes. "Because I got tired of being told who mattered and who didn't." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust the shawl draped over her shoulders. She didn't want him to see how much they meant. The rest of the day passed in steady work, sorting, carrying, small repairs. No chains, no shouting, no cruelty. Just labor. It left her unsettled because for the first time in years, survival didn't come with pain attached. When night fell, he lit the stove again and set another pot to simmer. The smell of root and spice filled the small house. They ate in silence, but it wasn't hostile. Arian kept glancing at the bolt on her door later that night. She slid it across, listened to the solid click, and lay down on the bed. She thought of his words, "Not meat, decide for yourself." And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what it might mean if he wasn't lying. She drifted into sleep, caught between fear of the world she had left behind and the faint, fragile possibility of something else. The next morning began with the quiet creak of the porch boards. Arian woke to it, instinct pulling her from uneasy sleep. She pushed herself upright and listened. Tyler's steps moved past her door, steady and deliberate, followed by the sound of the front door opening and closing. She waited, half expecting him to knock or call her name. No sound came, only the muted thud of tools being lifted outside. When she stepped into the kitchen, another note lay on the table. Bread and porridge in the pot. "Water's fresh. Meet me outside when ready." The handwriting was as plain as the man himself. Letters square, no flourish. She ate slowly, noticing how her body still wanted to rush through meals. She made herself chew, swallow, breathe. A small act, but it steadied her. The listeners might have wondered by now, what does he gain from this? Why feed her, clothe her, give her space? She had asked herself the same question every hour. She knew men didn't act without reason. Yet so far, no hidden trap had revealed itself. She found him by the orchard rows, crouched over a broken section of fence. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat, his muscles shifting with each strike of the hammer. He glanced up when she approached, then returned to his work. "Morning," he said. Arian adjusted the shawl over her shoulders. "What do you want me to do?" He tapped the broken plank. "Hold this straight." She knelt, hands pressing the wood into place while he nailed it down. His movements were quick, efficient. She caught herself watching his arms, the way his grip never faltered, the way he tested the board with a sharp tug before nodding. When the job was done, he leaned back on his heels. "You've worked before." She froze. "At markets. At kitchens." It wasn't a choice. He studied her for a moment, then only said, "Work is work. Choice matters. You have one here." The words scraped against old wounds. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned and began gathering fallen branches at the edge of the row. He didn't stop her, didn't correct her. He let her move at her own pace. By midday, the sun bore down harder. Tyler brought 2 mugs of Orvan water from the house. He handed her one, his hand brushing hers briefly. It was the first time they had touched since the coat in the market. Her chest tightened at the contact, a mixture of alarm and something unfamiliar. She drank quickly, avoiding his eyes. He leaned against the fence, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "People in town will talk," he said. Arian stiffened. "About what?" "About you being here. About me bringing you back." He kept his tone flat, but his eyes stayed on her. "You'll hear things if we go into the supply stall again. You don't answer them. Let me handle it." This was one of the unanswered questions from earlier. Would society allow this? The answer was clear now. No, not quietly. "And if they don't let it go," she asked, "then they'll learn to." It wasn't bravado. He said it like a man stating weather. That unsettled her more than threats would have. That evening, he cooked again. Draxon mushrooms fried with herbs filled the kitchen with a rich, earthy scent. He placed the plate between them on the table, not separating portions, just letting her take what she wanted. She sat across from him, chewing slowly, watching how he avoided wasting even small scraps. When the meal ended, she lingered. She studied him in silence until he finally raised an eyebrow. "Something." Her voice was quiet but sharp. "You haven't asked me where I came from." "Why?" He leaned back. "Because you'll tell me if you want to. I don't need it to keep you here." She frowned, unsettled. "Everyone asks. They want the story. It makes them feel bigger. I'm not everyone." The room held stillness after that. She wanted to test him, to find the weakness. So she asked, "Do you see me as your property?" His gaze stayed locked on hers. "No, you're sitting here because I don't." The words landed heavy. She had no reply. She pushed her chair back, stood, and left for her room. But she didn't bolt the door that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his steps pacing in the other room. She realized he gave her more than food or shelter. He gave her decisions. That frightened her, because now, if she chose to stay, it would be her own doing. And that meant she couldn't blame anyone if it broke her again. The following morning, mist clung low over the orchard rows. Arian stepped onto the porch, shawl pulled around her shoulders, and found Tyler already there. He sat on the top step, boots muddy from the early walk through the fields, a clay mug of Ferland seed coffee in his hand. The smell was sharp, bitter, real. He glanced at her, then slid the second mug across the step without a word. She hesitated, then took it, wrapping her fingers around the warm clay. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel hostile. It was heavy with things unsaid, the kind of pause where both waited to see if the other would break first. "You don't lock your door anymore," Tyler said finally, eyes on the orchard. Her throat tightened. "Does that bother you?" "No," he took a sip, steady. "Means you decided something." "I haven't decided anything," she said, too quickly defensive. She hated how it sounded. She set the mug down on the step. "I don't know what I'm doing here." "You're eating, sleeping, working. That's more than before." She looked at him sharply, but his face gave nothing away. Still, his words carried weight. He wasn't trying to claim her. He was pointing out what she had allowed herself. By midday, they loaded crates into the hauler for a trip into town. Arian tied the wrap skirt tight at her waist, Tyler's shirt hanging loose over her frame. Her legs were bare, dust streaking her calves as she climbed into the passenger seat. She hated the way her pulse jumped when he offered his hand to steady her, though he let go the moment she sat. Town was different this time. Heads turned openly. A group of men by the supply stall fell silent as they approached. One smirked. She walked fast for someone bought by the kilo. The words stung sharper than she expected. Her fists clenched around the shawl. Tyler's voice cut in before she could speak. "You got a problem with her, you've got a problem with me. Decide quick." His tone was even, not raised, but the man looked away, muttered something, and the smirk died. Arian stood stiff beside him, her body trembling. She wanted to say thank you, but couldn't. Gratitude felt too dangerous. On the way back, she pressed her forehead to the window. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." "Why?" "It's easier to ignore them." He shook his head. Easier isn't the same as right. She had no answer. The orchard came back into view, Rose familiar now, almost safe. That evening, after unloading, they sat on the porch again. The air smelled of rain. Arian leaned against the post, the oversized shirt slipping at her shoulder. She didn't pull it back up. She felt his gaze, steady, present, but not devouring. She broke the silence. If you wanted me as a woman, you could have taken it already. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't drop. He didn't move, didn't flinch. I don't take. If it happens, it's because you want it. Her breath caught. The directness unnerved her. She turned her face away, but inside something shifted, something fragile she hadn't felt in years. Not safety, choice. She lay awake later, staring at the ceiling again. This time, her hand didn't hover near the bolt. Instead, it rested lightly on the fabric of the coat he had given her, the one she still refused to let go. The night rain came hard, hammering the roof in bursts that made the house creak. Arian lay awake, listening. Every drop felt louder in the silence. She turned on her side, clutching the coat tighter. The bed was clean, safe, but her mind spun. She thought about the men in town, the words they threw like knives, bought by the kilo. She thought about Tyler standing there, calm as stone, making them back down with nothing but his presence. She thought about the way his eyes lingered just long enough to prove he saw her, but never long enough to claim her. She gave up on sleep. Barefoot, she crossed the hallway. The door to his room was half open, a faint glow from the small lamp inside. He sat at the edge of his bed, boots still on, elbows resting on his knees. His shirt clung damp to his shoulders from the rain earlier. He didn't look surprised to see her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. The noise. He gestured toward the chair in the corner. "Sit," she did, drawing the coat around herself. For a while, neither spoke. The rain filled the silence. His breathing was steady, unhurried, and she found herself matching it without meaning to. Finally, she whispered, "Do you regret it?" He glanced at her. "What? Buying me?" The words caught in her throat. She hated how raw they sounded. His jaw tightened, but not in anger. "I didn't buy you," he said. "I bought your freedom." Her stomach twisted. "That's just words. I'm still here, in your house, wearing your shirt." He leaned forward, voice low. "If you want to leave, I'll drive you back to the city right now. Door opens, you walk out, no chains. But you're still here, Arian. That's your choice, not mine." Her throat closed. She wanted to argue, but the truth in his words was heavier than any lock. She stayed silent. A crack of thunder shook the walls. She flinched, and his eyes caught the movement. Without a word, he stood, pulled a dry blanket from the shelf, and draped it over her shoulders. His fingers brushed her collarbone, rough and warm. He didn't linger, but the touch burned into her skin. She stared at him. "You don't act like the others." "I'm not the others." He said it so plainly, so certain, she almost believed him. Her chest tightened. Fear and something else, something sharper, twisted together. She rose from the chair, the coat slipping open, his blanket sliding to the floor. She took one step closer to him, then stopped. Her heart pounded against her ribs. If I keep staying, what do you see me as?" His eyes locked on hers. He didn't blink, didn't look away. A woman. The air between them grew heavy. She felt heat crawl up her neck. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like prey or a transaction or weight on a scale. She felt seen. It terrified her more than cruelty ever had. She stepped back, breaking the tension. "Good night," she whispered, voice unsteady. "Good night," he answered. She returned to her room, closed the door, but didn't bolt it. She slid into bed, staring at the ceiling, her skin still alive from the brush of his hand. The rain kept falling, but her thoughts were louder. The listeners might have asked, after the earlier chapters, when will she stop waiting for betrayal? Tonight gave them part of the answer. She hadn't yet, but the line between fear and trust had begun to blur. The rain finally broke near dawn, leaving the orchard soaked, the air thick with the smell of wet soil and bruised fruit. Arian woke before the sun rose. Her body felt heavy, but her mind was restless, torn between shame and longing. She lay there staring at the bolt on her door, still open. Every night it stayed that way. She felt both more afraid and more alive. She slipped from bed, the coat draped loosely over her. Her bare feet carried her to the kitchen, where the dim light from the stove still glowed. Tyler was there, already moving, setting a pan of Draxon mushrooms to fry. He wore only his trousers, chest bare, skin damp from washing outside. His back muscles flexed with each movement, the quiet strength of a man who never wasted effort. She froze in the doorway, pulse racing. He turned at the sound, eyes steady, unflinching. Couldn't sleep. She shook her head, fingers tightening on the coat. I keep waiting for the catch. There isn't one. He returned to the pan, stirring the mushrooms until steam rose. You eat. You work if you want. You stay if you choose. That's it. His calmness irritated her more than cruelty would have. She stepped closer, voice sharp. Then why me? Why risk everything just to bring me here? He set the pan aside, wiped his hands, and finally faced her fully. Because I was there. Because you were standing when most would have collapsed. Because I could. His eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. And because I wanted to, her breath caught. She hated that answer because it carried no logic, no bargain, just choice. It left her with nothing to cling to, no excuse to call him a liar. He handed her a plate of food. Eat. They sat at the table. She tasted the mushrooms, hot, earthy, touched with herbs. Real food, not scraps. The coat slid off one shoulder, and she let it. She noticed his eyes flick down once, quick, but he didn't reach. That restraint unsettled her more than hunger ever had. After the meal, he stood. Fence line needs checking. Come with me. The orchard was alive with dripping branches. Arian followed him through the rows, skirt brushing against her legs, bare feet damp with mud. He showed her how to test the drip lines, how to clear the debris. His voice was patient, low, never raised. She found herself watching the way he moved, precise, controlled, but never harsh. When they paused at the far end of the row, the silence between them stretched again. She finally said it. You look at me differently than they did in town, because I don't see what they see. And what do you see? She asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt at steadiness. He studied her, then answered without hesitation. A woman. Not weight. Not a price. Just a woman. The words hit her chest like a blow. She felt heat rise to her face, shame mixing with something dangerously close to desire. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but believing meant lowering her guard. And that was a risk she wasn't sure she could survive again. The walk back was quiet. That night, as they sat on the porch, the air still heavy with rain, she broke first. If I asked, what would you do? His gaze didn't waver. Only what you wanted. Her heart pounded. She stepped closer, the coat slipping down completely now, leaving only his shirt tied at her waist. She stopped a breath away from him. Then, kiss me. He didn't rush. He lifted a hand, cupped her jaw gently, and leaned in with a steadiness that made her knees weak. The kiss was not greedy, not claiming, just firm, real grounding. Her lips parted against his, and for the first time since she could remember, she felt wanted without being consumed. When it broke, she stayed close, forehead resting against his. Her voice came out raw. I don't want to be meat anymore. His hand tightened at her waist. Then don't be. You're more than that here. She pulled in a shaking breath. For once, she believed him. That night, she didn't go back to her room. She followed him inside, into his. They didn't rush. They lay together on the bed, her head on his chest, his arm firm around her. No chains, no bargains, just warmth and choice. Sleep came easier than it had in years. The next morning the air was cool and clear. The storm washed away, leaving the orchard sharp and bright under the pale sky. Arian stirred before Tyler moved, her head still on his chest, the steady rise and fall of his breathing grounding her in a way that felt impossibly new. For a moment she lay still, testing the reality of it. His warmth, the faint smell of earth and sweat on his skin, the rough calluses against her bare arm. She had never woken like this before, not without dread clawing at her throat. She sat up slowly, pulling the coat around her shoulders. Tyler opened his eyes, watched her without speaking, and then pushed himself upright. "Coffee," he said simply, as if nothing monumental had shifted between them the night before. But his hand lingered on her back a second longer than it needed to as he stood. They ate breakfast together in silence. Root stew reheated from the pot, Zyron bread softened with steam, Furlan seed coffee poured into chipped mugs. There was no tension in the quiet, only a steadiness, like two people testing the new shape of something fragile but real. Afterward, Tyler stepped onto the porch with her. The orchard stretched endless and wet, rose alive with the sound of dripping leaves. He handed her a basket. "Today we pick what the rain loosened. Fruit won't keep long on the ground." She followed him into the rows. For the first time, the work felt different. She wasn't laboring for survival. She was working with him. Her hands moved quickly, careful not to bruise the fruit, while he carried the heavier loads to the cart. Every so often their eyes met across the row. No word were needed. By midday, sweat ran down her back, the shirt sticking to her skin, but she didn't care. When they sat under the trees to rest, she tore open a fruit with her hands and offered him half. He accepted without hesitation, their fingers brushing as the juice dripped onto their wrists. She laughed, short, surprised at herself. He looked at her, not smiling, but with a warmth in his eyes that went deeper than words. Later, they returned to the cottage. The baskets were stacked high, the house filled with the smell of ripening fruit. Tyler set the last crate down, straightened, and looked at her. "This place was quiet too long," he said. "And now?" she asked. "Now it's different." His voice stayed calm, but his meaning was clear. The questions that had lingered from the first chapters, why her, why risk it, what future could there be, found their answer not in a speech, but in the life they were building, one task, one meal, one touch at a time. That evening, they sat on the porch again, side by side, the orchard glowing gold in the last light. Arian leaned against the post, hair still damp from washing, his shirt hanging loose around her shoulders. She turned to him, her voice low. "I choose this. I choose to stay." He met her gaze, steady as always. "Then it's yours as much as mine." She slid closer, pressing her leg against his, not hesitating this time. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, drawing her against him. For the first time since the scale, since the jeers, since the weight of being sold by the kilo, she fell whole. Night fell slowly, the orchard settling into silence. Inside the cottage, 2 cups sat side by side on the shelf, 2 bowls in the sink, 2 sets of clothes folded near the fire. No chains, no bargains, no uncertainty. Just a home. And when she lay in his bed that night, his arm around her waist, her body finally at ease, she understood. She was no longer measured, priced, or weighed. She was chosen, and she had chosen back. The story ended not in the market, not in shame, but here, in the quiet rhythm of 2 lives joined, the orchard no longer silent, but alive with the sound of belonging. Days passed, the rhythm of life in the orchard smoothing into something steady, something quietly shared. Morning light came through the window each day, catching dust motes in the air, while Arian stretched beside Tyler, no longer cautious, no longer clutching the coat for safety. She rose freely now, slipping into one of his shirts without tying it tight, walking barefoot through the kitchen as if the house had always been hers. They worked together in the fields, her laugh breaking the silence when he teased her for sorting fruit too slowly, his hand brushing against hers as they lifted baskets. At midday, they shared meals under the trees. Varan root stew simmered the night before, larnberry porridge sweetened with seed. In town, when eyes followed them, she no longer shrank. She stood at his side, shoulders squared, as he carried their supplies without a word of apology. The whispers still came, but they no longer pierced. One evening, the orchard was alive with the smell of ripening fruit, heavy in the warm air. They had worked longer than usual, stacking crates until their arms burned. By the time they returned to the house, the sky was streaked with pale gold, and the windows glowed from the fire inside. Arian leaned against the doorway, sweat dampening her shirt until it clung to her curves. her green hair sticking in damp strands to her face. She watched him drop the last crate, muscles flexing under the thin fabric of his shirt, and something inside her tightened with certainty. "You never asked me to stay," she said softly. He looked at her, breathing steady. "Because I knew you would when you were ready." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She stepped forward, closing the space between them. "I'm ready now." This time, there was no hesitation, no silent pulling back. Her hands slid against his chest, fingers curling in the damp fabric. He caught her waist, pulling her closer, and kissed her, firm, hungry, unrestrained in a way neither of them had allowed before. The taste of salt and heat filled her mouth, the press of his body answering every unspoken question she had carried since the market. They stumbled together toward his room, the urgency between them finally breaking through weeks of restraint. She shrugged off his shirt, let it fall, and met his gaze without fear. He undressed her slowly at first, then with growing urgency, until she stood bare under his eyes. He didn't rush. He took her in, the curve of her blue skin, the faint glow across her collarbones, the tremble of her breath. His hand traced her hip, her stomach, grounding her as her nerves fought with her need. When he laid her down, the mattress creaked under their weight, his body pressing hers into the warmth of the blanket. His touch was firm but careful, guiding her, never forcing. She arched against him, a low sound breaking from her throat as her hands dug into his back. His breath grew rough in her ear, his voice low, raw. "You're mine only because you want to be." She pulled him closer in answer, legs wrapping around his waist, body rising to meet every movement. Heat built between them, sweat slick against skin, the rhythm of their bodies matching until the orchard silence outside was drowned out by their gasps and the sound of the bed shifting under them. He kissed her neck, her collarbone, her mouth again, each one anchoring her deeper into the moment. Time lost meaning. Every shift, every thrust, every tightening grip of his hand at her thigh pulled her further from the memory of the scale, the jeers, the weight that had once defined her. Here, in his arms, she was nothing but a woman, alive, wanted free. When it ended, they lay tangled together, her head pressed to his chest, his hand still firm on her back. His breathing was rough but steady, hers ragged but slowly calming. Neither spoke for a long while. There was no need. Finally, she whispered into the quiet, "I'm not meat." He tilted his head, kissed the top of her damp hair. "No, you're Aryan." And for the first time in her life, she believed it without doubt. The final chapter closed not in fear, not in uncertainty, but in the simple truth of two people who had chosen each other, and in the warmth of a home that was now theirs.